Hi everyone, Mrs. Jones here. In this video, we are going to think about everything that you learned in the last video about patterns and organizing our information in tables and then writing an expression from that table to now in this video focus on tables to equations. So remember the big difference between an expression and an equation is that we're going to see that equal sign. So you'll remember from the last video that we've been focusing on this expression at the top here, where we have our coefficient that we're multiplying by n, and based on our patterns, n represented the stage number. And then we added the starting value, which is whatever we had, however many shapes we had at stage 0. Well, today we are going to focus on an equation. So notice that it's quite similar, this equation. However, my equation now has x and y. So x is going to be our input and y is going to be our output. X, you can think about if you want to keep thinking about our patterns. X is how many stages or the stage number, and y would be the number of shapes at that stage number. So we're going to focus on this equation today. So let's say we have this table right here. Well, what we're going to do here is we are going to annotate it just like we've been doing thus far. So I know that for me to go from -1 to 3, I'm going to add 4. For me to go from 11 to -9, I know I'm subtracting 20. 3 to 5, I'm going to add 2. -9 to -19, I'm taking away 10. 5 to 10, I've added 5. And -19 to -44 is going to be subtract 25. So now what we need to do is we need to figure out the coefficient. We actually have 3 ways of finding that, and we can double check that they're all the same. Remember that we are going to divide what's happening on the y by what's happening on my x. So I'm going to do -20 divided by 4, and that's going to get me to -5. I can then do -10 divided by 2, and that's also going to get me to -5. And last but not least, I can do -25 divided by 5, which will also get me to -5. This should be the same for every single one. So notice that my coefficient here is going to be -5. Oops, not sure how that happened. Sorry about that. So coefficient equals -5. Now what we need to do is we need to figure out our starting value. But notice that 0 is missing from my table. So I'm going to rebuild my table here, where I have x and I have y, and I'm going to write -1, 11, and then I'm going to put a 0. Now, I would rather work off of the -1 here because it's closer to 0 than the +3 is. So I know that as I'm moving forward along my table, I'm subtracting 5 every time. That's what this coefficient is telling me, that for every stage, I'm subtracting 5. So if I look at this new table, I know that if I'm going forward in my x, then that means I need to take 5 away. So 11 minus 5 is going to be 6, which means my starting value is going to be 6. So now I need to take all of this information together and write my equation. So I'm going to have y equals my coefficient times x plus my starting value. And so y equals -5x plus 6 is our final answer. And what's really cool is that we could always go check this. So I could take what's in the table. So for instance, let's focus on 3, -9. Let's check this. Let's plug in 3 into x and see if we get -9. Well, -5 times 3 is -15. -15 plus 6 is -9. So we did this correctly. All right, great. I would like you to try this next one on your own. So pause the video and try this. Great, you're back. So hopefully you've annotated your table and you've shown the changes in x and y. And hopefully you then found that your coefficient is going to be 6. Remember, there's multiple ways to do this, but every single one of them should still get you to the answer of 6 for your coefficient. What we then need to do is we need to figure out our starting value. So I actually took a shortcut here that I want to show you. I decided -2 was going to be closer to work with up here than 3. So I decided -2 is going to be -16 according to my table. And I now need to get back to my starting value. Well, in order for me to go from -2 to 0, I have to add 2 right here. So I'm skipping 2 jumps. Well, I know based on my coefficient that for every 1 jump, I'm skipping 6. So what I can do down here is I can actually say, well, wait a second. If I'm skipping 2 jumps, 2 times 6 is going to be 12. So let me just do negative 16 plus 12, which will get me to my negative 4 for my starting value. So it's another way of, instead of building back what's negative 1 and then what's 0, we can take a shortcut. So this gets me then to my starting value of negative 4. So when I put this all together, my equation should be y equals 6x minus 4. We're going to do that shortcut thing a couple more times, so hopefully you get the hang of it. So pause the video again here, and I want you, whoops, oh no, pause the video again, and try to figure this one out on your own. Okay, great, you're back. And I know I revealed what the coefficient was, but hopefully you set it up and you got that the coefficient was 1/2. So this tells me that for every stage value, my shapes or whatever it is that y is, the output is increasing by 1/2. But now I have to go back and I have to figure out 0. So this time I'm going from 2 back up to 0. So remember, we're subtracting. So if I know that as I grow this way, as I grow this way, as it becomes more positive, I'm adding 1/2. That means in order to go backwards, I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to subtract it twice because I'm skipping back 2 places to 0. So negative 2 times 1/2 is going to be negative 1. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm doing 7 minus 1, which is 6. And that's where this starting value of 6 comes from. So when I put it all together, I get y equals 1/2 x plus. All right, try this one, please, on your own. Pause the video. All right, you're back. So hopefully you've annotated. And hopefully, no matter how you did it, you calculated that your coefficient here was negative 5. All right, so now we're going to use that information to figure out our starting value. This time, I decided to work forwards, thinking about my negative 2 to 0. When I did this, I'm skipping 2 steps. I know that for every 1 step, I'm going to subtract 5. But if this time I'm skipping 2 steps, I can do negative 5 times 2, which is going to get me to negative 10. So that means that in order to find this 13, or in order, sorry, to find the 3 here, I'm doing 13 minus 10, which is 3. So my starting value is 3. When I put this all together, my equation should be y equals negative 5x plus 3. Okay, we are going to do one more together. So if you notice on this one, what to you, when you look here, feels unfamiliar or feels uncomfortable? Perhaps you're noticing that your x values are not in order. I don't like that either. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to rewrite my table, but make sure that my x values are in order. And remember, these are corresponding with one another. So if I have negative 3 that pairs with 20, I should have negative 3 that pairs with 20. Okay? So let's now annotate. I know that in order for me to, here, I'm adding 8, and here, I'm adding 4. Here, I'm subtracting 24, and here, I'm subtracting 12. So when I go do that math, I'm doing my change in the y over the change in x. I'm going to get negative 3, and I can double check it with the other comparison, and I also get negative 3. So I know that my coefficient is negative 3. So that means that for every stage value, I am losing 3. All right, so now let's go back and figure out our 0, or our starting value. I'm going to work off of the negative 3 comma 20 and go to 0. Well, I know that for me to go from negative 3 to 0, I'm adding 3. So that means I need to go forward 3 spots. Whoops. Oh boy. I'm so sorry. In order for me to go forward 3 spots, I'm going to multiply whatever's happening as I go forward. Well, as that's happening, I'm going to subtract. So this 3 is the 3 spots. This negative 3 is that tells me that each spot I'm losing 3. Well, that number is negative 9. So in order to figure out my starting value, I need to do 20 minus 9, which is 11. So my starting value is going to be 11. So when I put this all together, my equation is going to be y equals negative 3x plus 11. And remember, we can also go double check this. So let's say we wanted to double check my 5, -4. I could go plug in y equals -3 times 5 plus 11. I know that -3 times 5 is -15, plus 11 should get me to -4, and that's what my table says, and so I've done it correct. Hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, please just ask, and I promise we'll do a lot more practice in class and for homework.